Hey everybody, Mike Miller with the Herald Times, columnist Jeremy Price back here at Assembly Hall. What a wild Saturday this turned out to be, Jeremy. It was certainly no walk through the park for Indiana, a 74-68 victory over Minnesota, a victory that almost wasn't.
Yeah.
This was a game that Indiana never really asserted themselves, came back from an early sloppy start to the game, took a 39-27 halftime lead, built its lead up to 16 points both at the end of the first half and early on in the second half, and from there they nearly lost every darn thing.
Yeah, it was a game that could have been a walk in the park. I guess the crazy thing was that when Indiana built that 16-point lead, it wasn't like they were playing spectacularly well or shooting the ball spectacularly well. As a matter of fact, this was a horrid shooting game for Indiana, especially from three, compared to what we've gotten used to over the last three bombings that had preceded this one. So, but then they just, it was kind of a lack of focus. I don't know if they just kind of expected that Minnesota would sort of roll over and go the way of Ohio State, Illinois, and Northwestern, but they didn't, and wound up fighting for their lives down the stretch.
Transition defense was a big problem for Indiana today. Nate Mason and, God, I'm already forgetting the dude's name, Kevin Dorsey. Kevin Dorsey nearly beat Indiana today. Nate Mason, Kevin Dorsey scored 21 points each. Really just kind of throwing Indiana's up-tempo right back at them, running through Indiana, running past Indiana defenders, just making things difficult in transition. And to that end, a lot of layups, a lot of dunks. I think of Minnesota's 17 second-half field goals, 15 of which were either layups or dunks. So
yeah.
Getting to the rim with ease, it was just some of the defensive plays that Indiana kind of divorced itself from over the last month. Really, the play that really elevated their performance over the last month or so eluded it today. It just wasn't. You didn't see that same defensive intensity sustained for 40 minutes.
No, you really only saw it in a few stretches here and there.
Mostly early.
And yeah, mostly early. And then basically the final 3 minutes finally showed up again. But a little bit of that, like you said, there was so much of that was transition. I mean, part of it was poor defense, but the other part was really bad offense, which created those transition opportunities for Minnesota. And Minnesota gladly took advantage. It just, aside from just the off shooting, it seemed like the shot selection wasn't necessarily too good. The spacing wasn't right. Early on, Indiana wasn't shooting well, but they were getting offensive rebounds. The second half, the offensive rebounding seemed to go away for at least a large stretch, up until the one big offensive rebound that finally came after Indiana fell behind by a point.
Yeah, Indiana shot 2 of 18 from 3 today. Never really got that going. Yogi Ferrell said afterwards he never really felt like they really established their drive and kick game to any degree. Really, the entire offense, for the most part, was Thomas Bryant. I mean, he was the only consistent guy for them all day. Finished with a career-high 23. The Big Ten's leading field goal percentage shooter, went 11 for 13 from the floor, as you would expect Thomas Bryant to do in this matchup. Really asserted himself at times, and I think, 7-0 start for Minnesota. Bryant had the first points for Indiana. Bryant was there when they needed points in the middle of their run, midway through the first half. And again, at the very end of the game, when Indiana just needed anybody to step up, anybody to be there, there was Bryant on that offensive end yet again.
Yeah, had the big offensive rebound, follow dunk that put Indiana ahead.
Huge.
But if anything, that was part of what kind of got Indiana in trouble, was the fact that they got away from going inside to Thomas Bryant, or at least playing through Thomas Bryant in the second half. I mean, I think he had 13 at the half, and then had 4 points there in that last 2-3 minutes, whatever it was. So really only had 6 points the rest of the first 16 minutes of the second half, really. So I thought that was a big fault for Indiana. But for all the faults they had, I guess the silver lining, if you will, is the fact that they did find a way to pull out this game in the end, made the plays they needed to make, offensively, defensively, and if anything, in my mind, that just sort of highlighted the lack of, I don't know, maybe lack of focus is too strong of a word, but just sort of the lack of engagement really they had today. I mean, I think they were willing, but just, I think Tom Crean said they weren't sharp, and I called it casual in my column. They were just sort of casual about things today, and I think that was just the real struggle, is to sort of find that edge that they've been so successful with, and it just wasn't there today.
Can I go back on something for a second?
You can.
Can Indiana ever feed Bryant enough?
Well, probably not.
It seems like every game we kind of come out of, wondering, did they get it to him enough? I mean, because there are certainly points in the game you're wondering, all right, why are they settling for some of these longer jump shots, these longer twos? Frankly, even some of the threes they take. This is a day that Tom Crean said they didn't take enough threes, puzzlingly. But it seems to me that more often than not, we're always wondering, are they doing enough with Bryant?
Yeah, and I would add to that, not just Bryant, but Max Bielfeldt, who in the first half had 8 points, and it seemed like when Bryant wasn't getting the ball, then Bielfeldt was, and so they were really able to expose the front court of Minnesota, which is limited not only in terms of depth, but in terms of skill, really. And so Indiana did a good job taking advantage of that. If I would give Minnesota some credit, they kind of gave up on going with the big lineup, the matchup with Indiana in the second half, and went with a 3-guard lineup, which became a bit more of a problem for Indiana because right now, with James Blackman out, Indiana's somewhat limited at guard. You're only comfortable with Robert Johnson and Yogi Ferrell at guard. You really don't want Nick Zeisloff defending a McBrayer or a Dorsey or Nate Mason on the perimeter as much. Excuse me. And I think maybe that highlights kind of the situation that Indiana is going to find itself in to spin this forward to Michigan, because Michigan is another team that's very perimeter-oriented, a lot of guards, and could present some matchup problems that way for Indiana. But Indiana also is going to have a big advantage when it comes to the front court against Michigan, and Indiana's got to make up its mind that it's going to take advantage of that like it did in the first half, not the second half today.
We saw something interesting early in this one, too. I thought some of the best minutes of the first half came when they had Juwan Morgan, Max Bielfeldt in, and I think they had OG playing the 3. Actually got some of their best minutes of the first half with that combination out there. Something maybe we might see a little bit more going forward at different spurts.
Yeah, and Juwan Morgan was really good. I think OG was really good in stretches today. Both those guys continue to come on and play better and better as the season goes on. I think second half not so much again, but they also maybe didn't see the floor quite as much in the second half. OG probably more than Juwan Morgan, but and really same for Bielfeldt. It didn't seem like he played a whole lot of second half minutes either, or at least wasn't a factor when he was in there because you didn't notice him much. So I think that's something that Indiana wants to do spinning forward, and certainly putting OG on the perimeter has its pluses and minuses. There's still a certain comfort level where there are times that he looks okay with that, and there are other times where he still looks a little bit of a fish out of water on the perimeter. So, I mean, that's definitely a work in progress, but I think at this point you've got to throw him in there and sink or swim.
Different dimension, one that Indiana can kind of explore as we wade into these next few games. Tuesday, it's the revenge tour for Max Bielfeldt, going back up to Ann Arbor after they very unceremoniously told him, thank you for your 4 years. We're going to move in a different direction here. It'll be a big emotional game for Max Bielfeldt. Excuse me, you're contagious. It'll be an emotional game for Max Bielfeldt. Talked to Yogi Ferrell briefly about this after the game, saying that this is actually, granted it's Indiana versus Michigan, but at the end of the day, they really do want to play well for Max Bielfeldt. They want to go up there and get a win. And hey, it's Michigan. Indiana always wants to be Michigan. So
yeah, and I think obviously the best chance for Indiana is for the other guys to step up for Max, because for a guy like Max, it's going to be very difficult to sort of focus in and rein in those emotions and not try to do too much. I mean, the best situation for him is he's just sort of a complementary piece that hits the open layup when it's there, gets the rebounds, makes the simple pass, just does the things he knows how to do, at least until the nerves calm down and he kind of gets settled into the game.
Yeah, you can't go out there in the first few minutes trying to beat Michigan, right there in those first few minutes. But we'll see what happens. We'll preview that game Monday. I'm sure we'll step in the office or step here. I don't know where it will be, but we'll be somewhere and we'll talk about that. Big week for Indiana athletics, Michigan, signing day Wednesday, and a whole lot of other fun. I got to get Jeremy to just out of here. You got to get to a high school game, so we're going to cut
Never enough basketball for me.
All right. Thanks, guys.